HackerOne, we're very excited about our partnership with Scythe, and I'm happy to be here to present today. So a little bit about myself. As Chris said, I'm head of assessments at HackerOne. I lead our HackerOne assessment program. I've been doing this for 20 years in some form or fashion. I started out as a software developer back in 1999. I made an unexpected turn into becoming a breaker instead of a builder. In 2005, I started out working at a large financial organization on their application security team. From there, I've led and participated in thousands of application network penetration tests. I've performed red team simulations, social engineering, physical assessments, you name it. And prior to coming to HackerOne back in October of last year, I led a very large consulting practice that focused on pen testing for customers as well. So most of my experience comes from the traditional consulting world. In parallel to that, I've also been responsible for helping stand up some SaaS-based products and managed services that are focused on information security. So topic very near and dear to my heart. I'm excited to be here today and talk about collaboration. At HackerOne, we do almost everything through collaboration. So this is something that's very natural for us to speak about. So I'm excited to be here. And also I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina for any of those on the East Coast. So a little bit about HackerOne. So we are a facilitator of collaboration between companies and hackers. We help our customers accomplish their security objectives, reduce risk, and ideally prevent breaches. So how do we do that? Back in 2012, when we started, we were mainly a bug bounty program company, one of the first companies to facilitate bug bounty programs. We still do very much of that today. I'll give some examples later on and kind of how that leads to collaboration. But we help companies through either private or public bug bounty programs. We also have a very a good assessments program, which is what I lead. We do pen tests, we do challenges, which are basically time-bound bug bounties. A bug bounty is something that goes on over time. It's a subscription-based, it's continuous testing. What I lead is more point-in-time testing. It can also be focused on compliance and assurance. We also have a vulnerability disclosure program. We facilitate these for customers that are looking to have a way for third parties to responsibly share vulnerabilities and problems that they find in the wild with the company so they could be aware of them and ideally fix them. So we have about 2,300 customers. We have 830,000 registered hackers that are collaborating with our customers, helping them solve their problems. We have over time reported over 181,000 vulnerabilities, and that has led to over $140 million that have been paid out to hackers. So really amazing statistics, and a lot of great work has been done here at HackerOne prior to me joining and even since then. Just to show you a growth in adoption, you'll see here on the screen, just with our 3 services. Bug bounty, last year we increased 34% in our program growth. Our vulnerability disclosure program, our year-over-year increase of bugs submitted has increased by 47%, and that's increased by 264% for pen tests. So the adoption of community-powered security testing is happening, and a lot of that is really collaborative and collaboration-based. So before we dive into that and give you an example, I want to talk a little bit about transparency and trust, and this is something that we care a lot about at HackerOne. One of our core company values is default to disclosure, which means that we always default to transparency unless there is a good reason not to. Of course, there are times when things do need to remain confidential or we can't share with everyone, but we by default as an entire company, we default to disclosure, and we believe that transparency leads to greater trust. So we actually went out and we talked to people outside of HackerOne, and we asked a lot of security professionals about their attitudes to security within their organizations. And here's what we found. 65% of organizations want to be seen as infallible. They don't want to be known as someone that can make a mistake. They want to be known as perfect for everyone on the outside. 38% of those companies aren't open about their cybersecurity practices. And 64% of these organizations say that they have a culture that is security through obscurity. So as I said, I've worked in InfoSec for about 16 years. And to be honest, I've always been pretty baffled that companies are not willing to publicly share what they do to improve their security posture and what they're doing to reduce risk over time. If you have an effort underway like that, you should be very proud of it. I would, as a customer, I think about this and I want to know, who do they partner with? What steps do they take on my behalf as a customer to protect my data? Also, what do their security programs look like and how rigorous are they? What are they looking for? What are they doing with what they find? These are the common questions. And I've always been baffled. You think about other companies and other industries, they're happy to share logos of who they work with. And that has always been something that's really been frowned upon in security. And we're asking at HackerOne, can we change that? So if you think about a company or a persona of a company that has a very strong security posture, what are some of the things that they have in common? So here's a few things that I've come up with. First of all, they are all companies that collaborate outside of their own walls. They're comfortable looking outside and they're looking to partner with someone else that might know better or can do it better. Also, they realize that security cannot be solved in a siloed world. They need collaboration. They need input from others. They need to work with others on their problems so they can reach better solutions. They also know that secrecy and obscurity don't increase attack resistance. And also, they know that transparency in the end breeds trust. So to see this in a different way, I want to compare two different approaches. One would be a style of security where we're commanding. And the other style of security is where we're collaborating. So just to go through these quickly here, the main principle for commanding would be a closed, confidential, and exclusive sort of method. In a collaborative world, we would be open, we would be transparent, we would be inclusive. The goal for commanding would be impenetrability and compliance. For collaboration, it would be the reduction of cyber risk. So who does the security? Who's responsible for it? In a commanding world, it would be certified experts. In a collaborative world, it would be everyone. The attitude in a commanding world would be a cynical guard, someone protecting someone from the bad guys from coming in. In a collaborative world, we would become business enablers. So our motto would be either danger, don't stay away, or maybe tell us what you see. We want to learn more. We want to know about that. Come collaborate with us, come work with us. So when things go wrong in a commanding world, we default to blaming someone or pointing fingers. In a collaborative world, we take that as an opportunity to learn. And finally, the cost from a commanding situation would be, it's been unchecked. Collaborative would be, let's correlate that with our results. So two different ways to look at it. So you guys are all probably very familiar with Log4Shell. This is something that, a current event started back in December. I want to share an example because I was sort of thinking about this talk and my idea. I thought this would be a great example to show collaboration in the information security space and how working together shows a significant outcome increase. So quick sort of cover here on Log4Shell. It's a software vulnerability specific to Apache Log4j2. Came up in that panel in the panel talk a few minutes ago pretty heavily. It's popular Java library for logging error messages and applications. Many companies use it. Back in December, an exploit became available for a vulnerability in it, and attackers started leveraging it. So obviously, many security companies were trying to get their arms around it, seeing if they were vulnerable, seeing if they were if they were potentially even being exploited. So at HackerOne, it became a very hot topic within our bug bounty programs, within our assessment offerings, and so forth. And so we tracked a lot of this data, and we also got involved and helped collaborate with our customers and our hackers. And I want to share the story with you because it has a really great outcome. Before I do so, though, I just want to compare two models that you're probably familiar with and how these can have positive outcomes. So when we harness collaboration in software, when you make the source code open, you unleash collaboration and innovation otherwise would not be possible. In security, you can do the same. When we make vulnerabilities and their fixes open, we can unleash collaboration and furthermore reduce risk that would not otherwise be possible. So keep this in mind as I kind of walk through the next few slides and I share what we experienced at HackerOne during the Log4Shell initiation. So back in December of last year, I think it was December 9th, Log4Shell was released. We immediately saw a lot of that and the news broke. We saw immediate focus on that within our bug bounty programs. These are continuous programs that have thousands and thousands of hackers constantly testing against companies' assets and looking for vulnerabilities and problems like these. And when something like this hits, we often see quite a spike. So our hackers didn't sit still. In the first 11 days since the vulnerability was disclosed, over 1,700 log4shell reports were submitted. Now, keep in mind, in a bug bounty program, just because it's submitted doesn't mean that it's valid, doesn't mean it's unique. So we have a triage team that spends a lot of time going through those, trying to identify what's a false positive, weeding those out, looking for what's actually exploitable and learning more about that, and then presenting that to the customer, and obviously taking care of our hackers and paying for rewards. So in the first 10 days, almost $250,000 was awarded just for log4shell vulnerabilities. Take that to current day, 398 reports have received a bounty. 635 valid vulnerabilities have been identified so far, and this has led to almost $1.3 million that has been paid out to our hacker community for finding these vulnerabilities for our customers. So let's talk a little bit about the collaborative effort of this. So take it back to the very first day. Payloads that were used between December 9th and 11th typically look like this on the screen. So they were very, very simple. Basically what this was doing was it was letting log4j ping back to a server under the hacker's control. But there were some limitations. The hacker, our hacker community quickly noticed that the results were returning false positives because email clients, chat clients, sometimes they would expand to DNS and they would just cause a ping back from those. So there would be a lot of false positives through that. They oftentimes couldn't determine if the pingback came from a vulnerable log4j package or maybe even something else. Another downside was that the hackers and the customers had a hard time nailing down the vulnerable component and if it was actually a vulnerable log4j package. So a lot of confusion was happening. But within the first 14 hours after that initial submission, we started seeing hackers submit their payloads to our platform and starting to collaborate together because they were sharing, they were being transparent with each other, and they were evolving the actual payload. So we started to adjust the payload that was typical for typical WAFs and exfiltrating data to reduce false positives and bypassing the initial patch, which was released. So you see in the second bullet, the payload is more complex, and this payload came directly from hacker collaboration. So a great example of how if you crowdsource something with a lot of different skills, you can actually achieve a greater good. We also started to identify that a certain segment of our hacker community were really, really good at identifying log4shell vulnerabilities. So we created a special cohort for this initiative, and we brought all those hackers together and we started assigning them to our customers. We did an analysis at first and discovered that only 30% of our customers were actually reporting on log4j. So what we did is we did a campaign. We shared that cohort of hackers with the rest of our customers. And by that time, we actually increased to about 77% of our customers having coverage for log4j over time. So a huge collaborative effort between our team, our customers, and our massive hacker community. So fast forward to December 20th, we basically moved forward with only about 10% of the initial, the simple payload that's at the top of the screen was still being used. 90% of all the payloads were actually the more sophisticated payloads, which was leading to greater value, fewer false positives, and a lot more value to our customers overall. I just want to highlight that this is something that's only possible through collaboration. So a little bit more on the depth. I talked some about the cohort already, but as part of this, over 600 unique hackers have submitted a log4j vulnerability to a HackerOne customer, which is a pretty substantial number. And as I said earlier, close to 30% of those hackers only had submitted one to a certain segment of customers, and we expanded that further to 77%, which is a much larger containment of our customers themselves. So I hope you enjoyed that. So let's talk a little bit about how we can improve. What can we learn from this? So our prediction in the future is that in the not so distant future, being open to working with hackers will amount to business management negligence. We also predict that cybersecurity is going to become collaborative, even more collaborative than it is today. We also predict that transparency will breed trust. Here's an example, and not to pick on Equifax, but this is from a recent Senate hearing where Equifax was basically asked if they had a way for hackers to contact Equifax if a vulnerability should be found in the wild. And unfortunately, the answer was technically no. And this is just one example of many that we are seeing where transparency is still not happening. And so we are looking to encourage companies to be more transparent, to breed that trust, and to be more collaborative and work together. And here are a few ideas around that. The good thing is that transparency is on the rise. Here's some examples of what we've seen. So I've seen customers that are shying away from using vendors and working with companies that have practices of security by secrecy. Also, governments and corporations are now requiring cybersecurity transparency from their suppliers, and that's in line with standards and frameworks such as NIST, which is great. Also, talented employees and employees that really care about what they do, they're basically deciding that they don't want to work for companies that don't practice transparency. Also, I'll get to more about this in a bit, but we have a corporate social responsibility, which requires transparency. Boards are now requiring insight into transparency about their security programs of, for those companies and what they actually focus on. And finally, cybersecurity leaders, we're finding that pooled defense is the best response to asymmetric threats. And the only way that pooled defense will work is if we collaborate and we're transparent with one another. In the end, transparency is a choice. So we have to make the decision, is this a choice that's worth making? A few things to think about, and I will say that transparency is not always easy. I work in an organization that is very transparent. It can lead to some very interesting conversations. It is an act of humility. It also may hurt someone's feelings. At first, it's going to be a rough start. We're going to face some challenges up front. We've never been transparent in the past. This is new to us. We've always defaulted to holding it in or not sharing when we don't know if it's right or not. You must be consistent when you're transparent. You have to always be transparent or you're not transparent. You can't be one or the other. And you're gonna, in the process, you're gonna put yourself up for scrutiny and questioning and feedback. I will tell you though, that that's actually how you get the best answers, when you put yourself out there, when you're transparent about what you're doing. And that leads to collaboration. So transparency in the end leads to digital trust. It cannot happen, collaboration cannot happen without transparency. Information security at its roots is probabilistic risk management, and risk management will benefit from transparency. It's also going to allow for specialization and more efficient use of resources. Without security, we can never be properly staffed or resourced. And I'd like to go back for the Log4j example of how we're much better off for having a collaborative group of hackers actually co-tackle this and come up with the right payload versus allowing everyone to go about it on their own. And also, trust does not ensue without transparency in place. So here at HackerOne, we have a corporate security responsibility. And the way I like to say it is, it's about committing to creating a safer digital world for everyone. As I said earlier, creating a safer internet. It's founded on 4 principles. So the first principle, which we've talked a lot about today, is encouraging industry-wide transparency, which will lead to trust and a shared intelligence. We also believe that we should be fostering a culture industry-wide that is collaborative. It gives everyone the tools to take control and reduce the cyber risk overall. We're also asking everyone to promote innovation by inspiring development teams to build with security in mind. So bring that secure product to life even faster, but do it securely. And then finally, we're holding ourselves and the people that we partner with, our suppliers, accountable for following best practices and developing security as an easy point of differentiation. So if this is appealing to you, you want to be part of the movement to shift from secrecy to transparency, this is something that we recently launched at HackerOne. I personally believe in it, and we already have a number of partners that have signed up, and they've basically taken the pledge, and they're now part of our network to move forward with transparency and collaboration and trust. Thank you so much for your time today. Looks like we have a few minutes left, so I'll open it up if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, let's see if anybody's got any questions for Danny.
Check the chat here too.
We check them. Checking the chat, Danny. We're checking it. So, hey, Danny, let me take a look. I don't know if we have any. We've got some memes, Danny.
I love memes.
If that helps. Question for you. You know, one of the things I thought of while you were chatting was cost of everything, and I feel bad. You're going to get this question because it could have went to anybody today, but you know, you must have these conversations often. People say, "Well, this is all great. Tell me where I'm going to get the funding to get started with a lot of this, because you must have some magic bucket that I don't know about." And that's, you know, even though security has gotten significantly funded in the last few years compared to where we were probably even, you know, let's say a half a decade ago, it's still not necessarily enough to fund everything that everybody's espousing, you know, that we're chatting about today. So, you know, what's your take on that? Where should you start? What do you see at HackerOne, and what kind of advice are you and your peers giving?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I think, you know, any effort is better than no effort at all. And I think obviously everyone has a unique sort of budget or approach to security, and not just a HackerOne. Most security companies have, you know, different options that can help a company, you know, just make sure that they're more critical assets, or maybe they're more sensitive data platforms are actually secure. And so I would say work with your partner. That's what we do at HackerOne. We actually sit down at the beginning of a program, and we start to really prioritize what's important, and, you know, what keeps you awake at night. What is your budget? What are you capable of? What do you want to accomplish? And what would be the sort of the most bang for the buck? We understand that everyone can't do it all, and not everyone has like a sort of an endless security budget. So I would say focus on priority, and, you know, maybe think about like a more long-term plan. The thing that I've seen in my career is that companies who don't have a strong focus on security posture, it's a little hard to get started, but start on something that's meaningful to you. And then over time, it will be easier to provide that justification to your leadership. Once they see that there is value and proof in actually performing this ongoing testing, and that it protects your customers and also your company, they'll start to see the value, and most likely it'll be much easier to justify that budget. In my pen testing days, many times we were brought in to just provide a proof of concept. It would maybe be a company that's never done a pen test before. There may be a small company. They don't have a security team, or if they do, it's just a few people. And we came in to provide a proof of concept, and sometimes we found some really, really bad stuff. But you know, what it did is internally in the company is it opened a lot of eyes to realizing that security matters too, and we should probably invest in that. So that would be my recommendation, really more steered around prioritization.
Great points, and you bring up a super interesting one, especially those that have never done a pen test. There's, you know, all kinds of emotions. Oh my God, we're opening ourselves up to things. You know, it's going to show that we're not as fortified as we should be. But that is the whole point in getting people comfortable with making that first move. It's to better the overall organization. But, you know, sometimes it's seen as a threat, and you know, positioning it correctly so it's not looked at that way is key. I have a follow on to that. So you get a chance to see tons of different verticals. You know, I think of like healthcare coming to mind. It's gotten severely attacked in the past couple of years, just because, you know, well, you could make lots of comments, but one of the ones is they do not always have the funding. I mean, they're barely operating in the black, most major hospitals to begin with. So adding an enormous amount of money for security has definitely caught them behind the 8 ball. But curious, if you were to look over the last year or two and rank the most vulnerable verticals, what would your list look like?
I would say I would put retail at the top of that list. Obviously, in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of innovation, like, you know, how we buy things, you know, from a consumer perspective.
Sure.
The retail industry has been very, very heavily attacked. Everything from like point of sale systems to you know, more PCI focused types of targets, you know, cardholder data, even down to like physical attacks. I've performed a lot of red teams for for retail companies over the years that, you know, are pretty soft overall. They have a lot of innovation that's happening, and a lot of those things aren't like, don't have the, you know, the real security rigor. And so, I mean, they're coming around, but that's the softer target I've seen in my past, you know, in the past few years.
Got it. Yeah. Well, thank you. I know that no one is protected, but it's always interesting to hear what you're seeing more of. And I think clearly we've got, you know, 200 plus folks on here. I'm sure their retail is well represented, but yeah. And I would probably, not only would I agree, I would add healthcare. If retail's in the 1A position, I'd put healthcare in the 1B position, both of them highly vulnerable areas right now. And, you know, if there's somebody who needs to go after, probably more funding, more capability. And of course, the toughest part, hiring the right people in this job market, in the security space, which is already monstrously difficult, but you have to spend the time, you have to find the people.
It's
right?
very difficult. Absolutely. I saw that there's also a question in the chat, if you want, from Justin McAfee. I can take that if you'd like.
Yeah, fire away.
So the question was, how would you respond to executives who believe that bug bounties place operations at risk, and furthermore, or puts increased undue focus on your operations and infrastructure? It's a really good question. It's a question we get often. And so at HackerOne, we typically recommend that you start with a private bug bounty, which is a much, much smaller group of hackers, still very effective, but it allows you to sort of a training wheels approach, where you're just learning how a bug bounty works. You're starting to see some actual results, but at the same time, you're not opening it up to the public, where you're going to have a lot more frequency of attack, and you're also going to have a much higher set of results. That's more results to go through and triage. That's more results to action once they've actually been confirmed. So our recommendation there, Justin, would be to start very, very small and suggest that to your executive team, and then only ramp that up when you're ready. You can stay private for as long as you want. We actually make recommendations to our customer when we think it's good to go public based on our experience. So hopefully that was helpful to your question.